Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever it is that you're listening and watching this today, this webinar on why build with steel. I'm Robert Johnson. I get the privilege of hosting this one and maybe future ones. We'll see if I get kicked off or removed after this first one. But I am Business Development Manager for Western North America for FRAMECAD, also the host of the Build It Better podcast, powered by FRAMECAD, which I think is kind of what shoved me into this role today. So I'm going to kind of throw the podcast persona on, and we're going to start a discussion. Today, we've got a panel of three real heavy hitters in the prefabricated cold form steel industry, at least as it pertains to North America. By heavy hitters, it's more emphasis on the hitting, not so much on the heavy, unless you're one of the three in particular. But I won't say who that is. That's for everybody else to figure out. Our panel today, Stanley Adwell, who is CEO and co-founder of IntelliSteel. Hey, Stanley, would you, first of all, welcome, and then tell us just a little bit about who and what you folks are.
Thanks, Robert. IntelliSteel has been around since about 2016. We are a cold form steel, primarily off-site manufacturer of panels, joists, and trusses. We also act as structural engineer of record for the majority of our projects. We are also a certified modular manufacturer from Florida to California, and we currently have offices in Groveland, Florida, which is Central Florida, just north of Orlando. We've got 130,000 square feet. We have 6 machines operating there, and we just opened up San Marcos, Texas, just 2 weeks ago. Cool. We've got a couple of machines there. Yeah. So that's us.
Awesome. Again, thanks for taking the time. Stanley is a wealth of information, as you will see. Number 2, we have Joe Trednick. Joe Trednick is a president of FrameCore, located here in Phoenix, Arizona. Welcome, Joe. Do the same, please. Let us know who you are and what you folks do.
No problem. Thank you very much, Robert, for the introduction. Again, my name is Joe Trednick. I'm the founder, president of FrameCore. Also own a general contracting company, Profab Construction. We've been in the cold form steel space for north of 4 years. We primarily focus on the build to rent market or single family home, and also multi-family, multi-level projects. We also do own the general contracting company, and that's where all of our skilled labor resides to do our installation. So we have a little bit of separation there, and very excited to be in this space, and very, very excited for the future of this.
Great, very good. Again, welcome. And last but certainly not least, Tim Lindquist, who is Business Development Manager for Central North America for FRAMECAD. Tim also has the distinct privilege of being a co-owner of a prefabricated cold form steel fabricator company, fabrication company. So welcome, Tim.
Yeah, thanks, Robert.
Yeah, give us the little lowdown, the little elevator pitch on who Tim is.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly not the heavy hitter that Stanley and Joe are, but I'll do my best to hold my own in this arena. Yeah, as you mentioned, I'm the business development manager for Central US with FRAMECAD. Previous lives, I wore hats of, as you mentioned, co-owner of companies, general contracting companies, offsite prefab companies that largely operated FRAMECAD equipment to fulfill our building needs. So, yeah, happy to be here and looking forward to it.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. So today we're going to talk about why build with steel, and primarily in the residential marketplace. You're welcome to pitch some questions via your chat. You find the chat button at the bottom. We will later at the end of this, we will have a question and answer session and answer as many questions as we can. The only other thing that I would ask is please make sure that you are on mute if you are not one of the panelists, just to eliminate any background noise or chances of it. So with all of that said, let's jump into this and start with the first topic. And Joe, I'm gonna pitch this first one to you on timelines, speed, and efficiency in particular. Why is it important? Why is speed important in construction, and especially from a developer standpoint?
Well, speed's critically important. As everybody knows, time is money. And from the project level down, you can't have delays. It affects your investors, your capital partners. It can have massive cost overruns. So being able to control the timeliness and speed of the framing process in particular sets the cadence for the rest of the project. Wearing both hats as both a commercial GC and now also a manufacturer, I've got to unfortunately be able to witness the other side to that coin with the wood framing and the massive amount of challenges, inefficiencies, inaccuracies that are a result of that, in addition to the shortage of skilled labor. So when we use this methodology and system, it literally de-risks projects from a project level down to the subcontractor level. We do a very comprehensive dive with the subcontractors we do work with to thoroughly explain how and why this system is faster, more efficient, more accurate. There's a little bit of a learning curve on that end, but once people get more up to speed, they don't want to go back to the wood framing. So to kind of recap that, just from project level down, from investors, bankers, business, or the owners of the projects, to the GC, to subcontractors, it streamlines everything and compresses the schedule and makes it more accurate.
Awesome. Stanley, so I mean, kind of touching on one of these things that he mentioned, especially in this day and age with with interest rates being so high, I would think that speed of construction was very important for a developer, just to potentially eliminate some of that interest on their construction loan. What else would you add to this?
I think kind of what Joe said too. I think that the speed is everything. As a developer coming out of COVID, for example, the issues that they experienced were rather significant. They've never experienced a pandemic before. They've never seen shortages in the supply chain and the material and labor as they had. So just by shortening the time frame of any part of a construction process, and just like Joe said, is going to have a huge impact on their overall risk and also their delivery schedule. So just taking off the table right now, if you had a project that got elongated because of standard traditional construction practices that bled into the COVID exposure, those projects turned upside down. In fact, they couldn't even go forward. Correct. So now they're looking at it as, I don't want to experience that again. And it's not just a pandemic. It's weather related. It could be political, or it could be environmental in any other shape or form. So I think that it goes beyond just the actual physical job site time frame. It stretches out into the risk, it stretches out into the insurances, it stretches out into the financing, and all of those end up becoming hugely impacted by the speed in which, what we do in cold form steel here is significant, and people are just getting witness of.
Yeah, it is still so new. I would think another one of these areas is return on investment. Especially if you're building the same kind of development down the street from somebody else that's doing the same thing, the quicker you get seats in the sheets, the faster you start getting those rent monies that you're able to sell a property, et cetera. Tim, is there anything that you would add to this that you've heard so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole, design for manufacturing assembly type setup is facilitating a significant increase in the speed of the construction as well. Just plans are getting done sooner, CFS plans are getting done sooner. You're starting to construct panels, trusses, joists before concrete's even being poured in some cases. So your speed to construction and your speed to occupancy is just monumentally shifted.
Yeah,
Robert,
and I think
just like I'll
please,
give you
go
I'll
ahead.
give you an exact I'll give you one example. So there was a project we did in South Florida. That project came in at just under 4 months ahead of schedule. That project was already pre-leased and pre-sold.
Hmm.
So the fact that they were able to reduce their interest carry, but also have, like you mentioned, heads and beds quick enough, that
Mhm.
changed the dynamic to such, it's one of their most profitable projects they ever had as a result of that. Now, we weren't the only piece of that speed, but what we did is we contributed to the follow-on of the rest of the follow-on trades and all the other parts and pieces that could get done sooner. And it also took out the risk of anything else happening, or should there be something happening, you had that time buffer in there to be able to get completed. So that was a major win for that developer, for them. And they've never forgot it. They're actually still doing business with us.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that I mean, again, as you alluded to, that this is still, people are just now getting to see this type of construction, and every one of us at least has been able to experience that first project for a developer when they see this. And I hear this over and over again without fail. Everybody that I say takes the plunge. I don't think that's accurate. I think you just do it. But everybody that does it doesn't want to go back to traditional construction and building the old way that they did. So great points all, guys. One correction I need to make is for your Q&A questions, utilize the Q&A link at the bottom, not the chat link, please. Okay. Tim, let's start with you on this one, on cost and margin. How important is cost and margin in development, and what are the different ways that cost and margin is looked at? And I would think that would be different based on whatever your role is, developer, general contractor, subcontractor, et cetera. But please elaborate.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if a project doesn't pencil out, it's not going to move forward. So I think it's of the utmost importance, the cost and the margin on the project. The cost being one, but the margin as well. If it doesn't pencil out in the cost, it's not going to move forward. And if there's not enough margin on the project, you're not going to want to do it again. So I think, anytime a developer can grab onto this concept of, what we've talked about too, the timelines lead into cost savings, which lead into better margins on projects and, a reduction of the overall cost. And I think all the things that we're going to talk about today are going to play a role in cost savings and how margins are increased, whether it's, insurances or anything like that. But I think, as a general contractor, when you take something like this in-house and you're prefabricating panelized, walls or trusses, you're eliminating a lot of the risk as well. And so you're able to capitalize on a higher margin than you would traditional framing, and you're reducing your cost because you're not having the callbacks, you're not having the rework things out in the field that are done, or that can be very expensive in that regard as well. So yeah, I think cost and the margin, they're just much more achievable when you're doing offsite type, prefabricated type construction.
Yeah, one of the things that I have to educate folks on, and I think we probably can all agree that we have to do this, is that when dealing with a general contractor, and in a greater sense, the majority of developers, they look at things on a line item basis as opposed to a pro forma basis. And there's so many things that help create the cost efficiencies when you look at it from a pro forma basis as opposed to line item. Everybody's always going to say wood line item is always going to be a little less than the light gauge steel line item. Maybe material to material, not always the case, but certainly there's a lot of things that play into that effect. And I'm gonna steal this, Stanley. before you jump in on this from Rex that was posted all over social media, at least IG and LinkedIn today, talking about benefits of using cold form steel construction. The dumpster charges is a huge one. Reduce debris and cleanup costs. There's you don't even need a dumpster on a project for the first bit. Savings on weather protection for all that stacks and stacks of lumber that are all around multifamily and single family residential projects. One that we're going to talk about a little bit later, huge reduction in insurance rates, both builders risk and general property. What would you add to all this, Stanley?
I think those are obviously, when you start talking to someone like a general contractor about the line items, a lot of times they get caught up in just the big numbers. They're not thinking about the rest of the items. We always talk about cost to build in our industry. What's your cost to build? And I'm not putting in the insurance yet or the foundations or time savings. I'm just talking about hard costs. Those items you just mentioned have a cumulative waterfall effect into a total cost to build. Well, like when a general contractor tells me, well, I've got a guaranteed price for lumber and that's what it's going to be, I ask them, are you sure? I mean, are you telling me that you don't buy any more lumber at all? Not at all. Not one more piece, not one more stick. You don't have to get anything else. Well, not exactly. Okay, well, let's talk about your real number, right? There's a budget number, then there's a real number that comes at the end of the project. Those line items all actually add up. And I'm not a general contractor. Joe and Tim both are, but we deal enough with them to recognize it always starts off with a conversation that says, well, you guys might be high. And we tell them, if we're coming in higher than your number, get on the phone with us. Let's talk about your scope. And I promise you, we'll get you to where it's lower than wood. And we do every time.
Yeah. It just, again, it's all about education back to, it's so new to people. People don't know what to look for. Right. Joe, do you find that you know, that this plays to our benefit on the GC side when it comes to cost and margin?
I do, and you know, one of the really big selling points that I always use when I do speak to developers is that, hey, listen, we're going to be able to, get a sizable deposit up front, but we'll lock in your raw material steel price so that will never fluctuate. Even if at the project level or the city it gets delayed, that steel isn't sitting in my yard or sitting at the vendor's facility, and we can literally de-risk the project again through controlling that cost from ever escalating. My labor won't change, and relatively speaking, but really, you take that, you eliminate that factor of price escalation off the table. And that has a resounding or resonating effect with all of my customer base. They really do like that. It's a huge advantage.
Yeah, I saw that quite a bit around COVID, a little bit of post-COVID, when lumber started going up from their very low ones, jobs that had been estimated and bid and budgets that were created when lumber was real low. Well, that they don't pay for that lumber until it's delivered on site. And so the problem with that is you pay whatever today's market price is. And it was killing projects. And at the time, to the betterment of prefabricated cold form steel, we were just getting inundated with trying to convert projects to steel to make them work. So great points all. Does anybody have anything else to add before I move on to the next one? I take it from your silence, there is none. So let's go on to the last one, and I'm going to pitch this one to Stanley to give it a start. He's done quite a bit of work in this particular on this item, insurance savings. For us, those of us that are in the business, it seems like and I don't say this to be derogatory to anybody, but it seems like a no-brainer. It's like, if I'm going to build a home for my loved one, am I going to build them something that's made out of timber or something that's out of light gauge steel? I'm probably going to go light gauge steel, to be honest with you. But Stanley, talk about insurance savings and some of the things that you've really been working on as of late, and some of the data that you have.
I mean, I think as far back as when I was at FRAMECAD, it just made sense to me that there had to be insurance adjustments, insurance savings, and it seemed like no different than trying to educate the market. It took a long time to educate the insurance industry. I'll tell you just a little bit of the work that we did. We started working with a couple of insurance companies specifically and started bringing them in and letting them see exactly what we're doing and what it impacts. They also shared with us what impacts them. So I'll give you a snapshot. They showed me that on their loss claims annually in a region, in Southeastern United States region, for example, the top 3 line items were catastrophic damage, fire, wind, seismic, tornadic, flood, right? And it was their biggest number, biggest loss claim payout. Second was water intrusion. And there was 5 or 6 sub bullets underneath water intrusion: mold, mildew, repair, medical, maintenance, etc. Replacement. Enormous. I mean, it's in the billions of dollars, right? And then the next
Correct.
line item was termites. So of those top 3 items that represent about 60% plus of their entire annual payout, cold form steel directly mitigates. So for them, lights started going off. So it only takes me to change from wood to this, and I'm at a cost comparative on hard costs to go from wood to this, to cold form steel, and we mitigate all of this. Okay, now we're engaged. But it seemed like nobody was hearing that forever. So now
No,
I
you're
can
right.
tell you that. Now I can tell you, Robert, we've got projects right now where our clients are seeing anywhere from 60 to 77% savings on some of the large multifamily or the large build to rent projects. And these projects just prior weren't penciling. They had gotten a financial budget and approval that by the time, with a budget number for insurance, by the time that they got their actual insurance rate, it was up 3 times, 3 to 4 times in some areas like Florida. So right now, if you had an option to walk into a production home builder, I think at some point you're going to have someone say to you, would you like it in wood or would you like it in steel? That's where I believe this industry is going, because the insurance is going to push it, the consumer is going to push it, and at some point it's just going to be right in front of us.
Yeah, I think another thing that's going to push it, municipalities and government, I
Yes.
think at some point is going to push it as well. We're already seeing that in places like places in Florida, Southern California, where there's been multiple fires. Insurers are saying, no, you build it back combustible, I'm not insuring you, I'm out. And then they're taking and leaving thousands, hundreds of thousands of people uninsurable.
Robert, one of the things that's interesting is that if they use, this is something we're starting to see now too, just because this is all happening in real time. So there is projects that are getting savings from just going from wood to cold form steel while still maintaining combustible components, whether it's decking or exterior.
Sure.
But here's the funny part. Here's the funny part is that the developers are the insurance companies are telling them, if you go to a non-combustible building using non-combustible sources, materials, then you get this savings. So we're now having developers making decisions on the fly on projects that were already permitted in wood that have now converted to cold form steel, that they're asking for us, well, what non-combustible products do you have that we can get? That means that the insurance company, in just the short time that I've been watching them make this change, are already impacting change to non-combustibility. So we're moving in the direction, and the insurance companies are the ones that are pushing us there.
Yeah, I agree. Joe, do you have any kind of recent numbers of change in what that delta or that savings was on projects that maybe were originally as wood that have been converted to steel? Do you have any numbers?
I do. We're currently working on a project in Flagstaff, Arizona. Flagstaff is very, it's a mountain area, pine trees and everything else. This particular project is up there on the hill, and it's 6 buildings, 4 stories, north of 300,000 total square feet. And this project was originally designed in wood. We ended up coming in and getting a contract and converting it to cold form steel. And because of the insurance savings from a non-combustible framing, we were actually lower than the wood number. So it was a very, very easy decision for this particular developer to make the switch over to us, and it's going incredibly well. But yeah, because of the insurance savings, we came in at a lower price.
Yeah,
So-
and that's just, again, one of many.
Well, yeah, but
Yeah.
to Stanley's point, though, the insurance companies kind of in real time are getting up to speed on this.
Yeah,
So really, it's the more exposure, the more people we have in our space, the faster hopefully they'll be quicker to adopt and adjust rates accordingly.
yeah.
Yeah.
One of those projects, 300. This was 2.5-3 years ago. 300,000 square foot single family rental property. That was wood that was converted. We were converting to steel. The delta was about $275,000 just in the builder's risk insurance. Of course, the ongoing property insurance is going to be less. But what it also did, which I found really interesting, is in the carriage houses, which were the units that are over garages, it was eliminating the need for fire sprinklers, and that was a game changer for the developer and making the whole thing pencil. Tim, what would you have to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think it's pretty well covered. I know in my past life, we ran into experiences where in some of the mountain regions of Utah that were prone to fires, we had people reaching out, building single family houses where the insurance companies were mandating that they build non-combustible, because they said, we've replaced the house twice and we're not doing it a third time, kind of deal. So I think, yeah, just to everybody else's point, the insurance companies are really driving this forward, and I think they're seeing it as a way to minimize their risk in insuring properties. And of course, they're not wanting to pay out money, so it's just going to continue to go down that road.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And again, you're going to see different savings in insurance and the way insurance companies deal with things depending on the region. One that is fresh to all of us is Hawaii and the devastating fire that happened there. And I found out after the fact that it was just a couple of years ago they had a fire that wasn't as bad as this, but in the same area. And some of these structures were previously burned. Folks, insurance is going to quit saying you got to quit building this way. I can't just continue to insure something that's just going to burn down again. So great talk. Does anybody have anything you want to add there? Okay. We're zipping along. By the way, thank you to the 66 plus folks that have joined us today so far. Some good stuff. I am going to touch on and kind of pitch a few of these questions from the Q&A. Let's start with this one up, and it's going to go to everybody, and you're just going to have to, whoever feels you got the answer, just go for it. Audrey says, how do you go through your scope of work with the general contractor, developer, and build team? Great question. Let's start with Joe.
How do you go through the scope of work?
Yeah, how do you go through your scope of work? Identify your scope of work with a GC, developer, and build team.
Well, I mean, you identify the scope of work by, typically the whatever type of building structure it is, and then I guess 90% of them are conversions. So,
correct.
I think it's kind of self-explanatory, respectfully. But yeah, I think the scope of work generally is dictated by the building type, and then the conversion process, and ultimately what the engineers are going to approve.
Right, and I'm sure there's some education. Maybe this is more of what they were alluding to, is that the education process of explaining to those GCs and developers the difference in how we're going to build that as opposed to you would see it traditionally built. So, Stanley?
Yeah. And this is not, Sue, this is not a knock on general contractors, because I think it's an unfair scenario for general contractors and traditional construction methods, because I believe that general contractors are basically thrown a set of half-baked plans that have been barely completed. They are incomplete, and they are basically told, go fix these on the job site, right? So you got architects drawing things that have no thought process about how certain things should go together. Engineers are trying to make things work with the MEPs, and that's not working, but it still goes to the job site. The general contractor stuck with a set of plans under a contract having to bake in these inefficiencies and deficiencies only to protect himself to try and find a way to get it done, right? I think that I think that what I find ourselves doing today in today's construct, and I'm talking some of the largest construction general contractors, is they are trying to find a way not to do something that they don't already do. I find general contractors tend to stick with what they do. If they are known for doing CMU block, elevated concrete, or wood, that's what they're going to do. And when you talk to developers and the developers want to go this route and explore this route, their hands are tied because the general contractor is really not incentivized, nor going to try and give them a reason in which to do that, because that puts them at even greater risk. Again, I'm not knocking a general contractor. If I'm in their shoes, I'm protecting my risk too, right? But that's what stymies our advancement and traditional's maintenance in the marketplace, is that there is this education requirement. And to Audrey's point, you have to kind of walk through a scope with a general contractor on a piece-by-piece basis and say, this is what we're providing, this is what it excludes, this is what it includes, right? And these are the things that you have to pull out. A lot of times there are certain critical items that are not pulled completely out or assumed, and it creates an apples to oranges comparison. But when you sit down and you actually bring it to an apples to apples comparison with a general contractor or with an owner, a general contractor, then you find out where the real savings are, and they're significant. And we still, us on this call and those listening, we still deal with people resisting our process. They resist our change and they resist our advancement.
Yeah, great points all. One of the other questions that I'll address just kind of generally pertaining to what you're talking about there is design codes, building codes. Folks, things have been built with light gauge steel, with cold form steel for years and years and years and years. Municipalities are very familiar with light gauge steel, cold form steel, primarily through the commercial world. So codes are there, building codes, all of the things that we're going to do with our systems are going to be built to code, whether that be Canada, US. We're always going to take care of those kinds of things. Johnny says, please elaborate how to deal with doors and window openings in a frame. Again, Tim, I'll let you hit this one.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways to deal with that, and some of it comes down to what kind of frame you're putting in. Is it a hollow metal welded frame? Is it a knockdown door frame? Is it an aluminum window frame? And a lot of those different manufacturers are going to have requirements on how their frames get attached to the actual framing. In my past life, we did a multitude of different things. Sometimes we ran a thinner piece of plywood in there for framing to attach windows to. We bucked them out with 2x material that was ripped down, or 2x4, 2x6, 2x8 material, depending on the wall thickness. So there's a lot of different options there, and a lot of it comes down to what is the architectural detail showing, and what is the window or door manufacturer requiring for that assembly in itself.
Yeah, and depending on we can dig deeper if you're utilizing one of our systems that does commercial profiles 3 5/8 and 6 inch, or 3.5 and 5.5. That's going to differ in your jam widths clearly. But Stanley, Joe, do you have anything you want to add to that one? Okay.
I think that people, I think just what you said, the architect's going to drive what's needed, and then whatever the selection of material. We used to find that the window manufacturers or door manufacturers, mostly window manufacturers, would require the wood bucking through just decades old spec. But when you called them and talked to them and asked them, would they go straight to steel without any bucking? They said yes. They'd have to provide you a warranty. At that time, they'd provide you a warranty coverage. They would accept the warranty coverage if it went straight to metal. They're basically stepping outside. Nowadays, they're pretty much showing all metal. I mean, I very rarely find window manufacturers that don't have a metal installation spec and warranty coverage.
Great point. Great point. Yeah, the other thing that I would say is, and I'm not sure how deep the question was intended for us to go, but because we're doing prefabricated panels, the design is done long before construction starts in the field. So there has to be a decision and choice on what specific door and window frame, fire extinguisher cabinet, medicine cabinet, all those things, because it's all designed into a panel. Folks, we don't come out after the fact with loose pieces of steel and frame in things. Your panels come out complete, which is one of the reasons that speed is what it is. I'm going to go right to this one, speed. I love this one. FRAMECAD versus wood, which is faster? Joe?
Well, FRAMECAD, I mean, in the field for sure. I mean, there's no question.
There it is.
Not even a question. Yeah, you're standing up finished panels as opposed to, you know, cutting and nailing things together in the field. There's actually no comparison whatsoever.
Yeah, you're doing, what would you find that percentage is? 60, maybe 65% of the framing is done in a controlled environment while they're out doing site work and pouring slabs. I've always said, if you start the clock from a big pile of lumber sitting beside a slab and our stack of wall panels, we're going to be done and moved on long before you get that thing done in a traditional wood piece. Tim, Stanley, do you have anything to add there?
I agree. It's impossible to think that something that is spitting out 100% cut and punched and drilled and notched and framed out material at 2,500 linear feet an hour is going to get matched by somebody trying to put something together after a rum dinner on the job site, culling through material and whacking off, you know, 2 foot here off a 10-foot stick, throwing half of it away, and then trying to put it together. It's just an impossibility. And it just drives me crazy that actually people try to even contest us when you're talking about, when you look at the material, you look at the stud come out, just look at it.
Yeah.
When it's impossible to compare.
Yeah, and pre-drilled. I mean, as you go into it, you know, pre-drilled, everything is there. So, the speed speaks for itself.
Yeah.
Has anyone experienced moisture accumulating in the walls or frame where the steel frames are screwed or bolted? Water intrusion around any bolts or screws? Has that ever? I've never seen anything. I've never had an issue with that. Any of the guys? No, I
haven't. But you're using galvanized material, and you're using 1,000-hour salt spray type screws and fasteners and connectors. Here, I always liken it to this. When someone says, "Well, is it galvanized? Is it going to rust?" Well, I mean, if you look at every single highway and every barrier and every road sign that's out there, that's galvanized metal that's out there. It's been sitting out there for how long, right? I've had a mock-up house sitting outside of our factory for 3.5 years, never once brought in Florida, not one time. You can't use a magnifying glass and find any rust on it. So
yeah, I would say the same thing. I was just in Southern California, and there was a cold form steel structure that's been built that's been outside for like 15 years. Is it discolored? Yeah, it's darker than it was before, but there's no rust on it. No. So this is a good one. I'm gonna add something to this one. Does the steel framing interfere with internal internet signals, or does it conduct lightning? Are you more likely to get struck by lightning in a metal framed house? Tim's grinning because I know he's heard this before. Tim, can you answer that?
Yeah, I mean the short answer is no, right? It does not. I mean, there's not enough density of the material there to really have an impact on, whether it's cell phone signal or internet signal or whatever kind of signal you want to put through it. Yeah, it's a common question, and I almost fell out of my chair the first time somebody asked me if they would get electrocuted inside their steel house. It's just like,
Oh, yeah.
if you understand the principles of grounding of electricity, like the fact that you have steel framing inside your house connected to a foundation is actually going to keep you safer, right? You're giving it a direct pathway to the foundation versus traveling through something inside your house. So, yeah, I can't help but smile a little bit when those questions come up, but it's a valid question, and I understand,
No, I
people
get it. I'm with
people
you.
ask.
Yeah, I'm with you. Here's another one. What assemblies for exterior structural sheathing are approved for non-combustible? I can think of a few, but Joe, what do you folks use for non-combustible sheathing?
We've really taken a liking to the magnesium oxide boards.
Mm-hmm.
They've proven to be very, I mean, even a half-inch material, I think, is a 2-hour fire rating. So we've been focusing pretty heavily on that material.
USG Structocrete is another one
Yeah.
that's for decking and sometimes roofing.
Yeah.
Dens glass, 5/8 Dens glass.
Yes.
We also utilized 22 gauge sheet steel in lieu of plywood for shear.
Mhm.
Electricians tend to dislike it because they can't cut their holes as easy, but you know, uh, yeah. Anything to add there, gentlemen? Okay. There are a few questions here, folks, that I'm skipping that ask specifically about price. One was price per square foot, average price per lineal foot. That's going to depend on the size of the stud, the cost of steel at any particular time. Um, you can reach out to us, and we're glad to talk about some of those things. There's a few questions on here about system purchases and what systems cost. You can reach out to us for a consultation at residential.framecad.com, and we'll be glad to go over some of those things with you. There's a gentleman here in Colorado, Tim, Northern Colorado. I think I know Lawrence. Yeah. But we're going to get back to these folks. We'll reach out to those that are asking about that system costs. National code is the zip system. This is something I don't know about, guys. Is the zip system with insulation approved for use on CFS and residential? And if not, what are your alternatives?
Using it on multiple projects.
Yeah, use the zip system. I know I've seen it on modular. A lot of the modular guys are using a zip system for exteriors. Um,
Yeah,
All right. What always strikes me as funny is that a lot of times people try to call us a system. I'm sure everybody on the panel agrees. They try to call us a system, and they don't realize we're just using, standard ASTM sticks and studs that just have a different process. But I always tell everybody, look, if you just take your standard wood building and you take it out and you suck out all the wood and you put in metal, everything else that you're going to put on that wood is going to be placed on this metal. It doesn't change. And I know seems like that's the biggest hurdle for people to get over. They think it's got to be something completely different because it's a system. They also think that the assemblies are so unique and so rare and so hard to find. Well, all the same fire and all the same sound rated assemblies are all available in plentiful of any type for any kind of building type out for construction. They're there. They're everywhere. We've tested them. FRAMECAD's tested them. Other people have tested them. They're generic and they work for every type of assembly you typically have. So I think a lot of this whole this idea that this is something so advanced that it needs special treatment is exactly the opposite. The best thing about it is it doesn't need anything special. It is something special just in its material. Everything else is the same as you'd put on wood.
Yeah, the efficiencies that are built into our system that have nothing to do with our system, but the efficiencies we bring to the entire project are innumerable. I mean, they just go on and on. And you tend to find it the longer and longer that you go. For those of you that have questions that are pending, I'm sorry we run out of time. We will get answers to your questions offline here. There are some great questions here, some additional questions that I would have loved to have gotten into, but next time, jump in. We'll start. We'll maybe give a little more time in the future for Q&A. So you can visit us, as I mentioned previously. You can visit us at residential.framecad.com, where you can find out more about steel framing, the future of residential construction. You can see our ebook. There's video case studies with both Stanley and Joe, as a matter of fact. And then again, any further questions, anything you want to reach out, consultation, that same website, residential.framecad.com. If you are in the Phoenix market, the Florida market, and you really want to do this, you need to reach out to Stanley and to Joe. We can get you their contact information. Stanley, real quick, what's the best way to reach you if somebody wants to reach you direct?
Best way to go is go to our website, and there's a informational page on there, and provide us just some basic information. We can get back to you and get to it quick.
Okay, and that's in Telesteel, telesteel.com, correct? Okay,
That's right.
Joe, how about you? What's the best way to get in touch with you to get some answers on things?
Yeah, same thing. You can go to the website and fill out the form there, and it gets directed actually right to me. Anybody
Okay.
else, if you'd like to give my cell phone number to Robert, that's fine too.
Okay, and what's the website? What's the web address?
FRAMECOR.com.
FRAMECOR.com. FRAMECOR. Okay, with the ECOR. With that, folks, I'm going to say thank you to Joe, to Tim, to Stanley. Appreciate all the support back at the mothership in New Zealand. We look forward to doing this again. Don't know when, but we're going to come up with more topics. Reach out to us with things you'd like to hear us talk about and future panels discuss. So for now, we'll see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks.